Good evening. It's great for you to be here. We have an amazing speaker for you this evening. I've listened to him speak several times. He's going to be speaking tonight about resolving conflict issues, and I think that you'll really enjoy his speech. Let's welcome up my friend, Perone Brown.
Thank you so much, Mr.
You're
Campbell. Well, I'm glad to be able to be here with you today. Many of you are managers and supervisors and project leads. And today we're going to talk about giving effective feedback and do a little presentation on that for you. Well, the reason why this is so necessary is you have people in your call center who are speaking to people on the phone, and you're used to kind of listening to what they're saying and critiquing them on what they're saying. But how do you get these 200, 300, or 400 people that you have working under you to effectively speak to your clients? Well, much of it has to do with how you speak to them, how they're motivated, how they're built up. I have noticed that most people look for the negative. They say things that are negative. Hopefully, I'll get out of the way so that you can see what we're talking about. But you're going to be speaking to people and giving them positive feedback so as to encourage them to give positive vibes to the people they're speaking to, which affects your bottom line. I worked in a call center myself for a number of years, and I was able to effectively help my team to do over 400% production. Myself, for the year, I made $8,000 as incentive, and each product I sold was worth 50 cents. And that was for 1 year I did that. And I led a team of over 400 people for 3 years in production. So I know a little bit about what's necessary. And one of the things that was necessary is the feedback I got from my manager. My manager was very instrumental in that. In fact, her name was Miss Valentine. And one of the things that she mentioned, and also others, it's an old saying, you might have heard it before, you can win more bees with honey than with vinegar. Have you ever heard that before? It's an old one. So what it's telling us is that we can affect people, we can get people to our side being nice. Just be nice instead of tart, like vinegar is. So this is why we are going to discuss this subject. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is feedback. What is feedback? What will it do for us? Well, feedback helps teams achieve goals. And your goal is to sell. So that's your bottom line. So what do you think will help you to do that? As we just talked about, anybody catch what will help us to give better feedback? Be kind.
Positive.
Yes.
Positive comments.
Exactly. Positive comments to the people who are working under us.
Sincerity.
And sincerity. Excellent. This is very good because these are the very points that we're going to talk about. In fact, you may have looked at my notes, but let's notice further. There are 4 steps. One is we want to set clear and concise objectives. Well, what exactly does that mean? Let me give you an example. Imagine you have a little cough and you have pain in your chest. And you go to the doctor, and that doctor says, well, you may have some congestive heart failure, you may have a growth in your lung, you may have perhaps an appendix that is about to burst. You may have all these things. We're just going to open you up, and we're just going to figure it out from there. Well, how would that make you feel? Not very good. In fact, you want to know exactly what that doctor's going to do, when he's going to do it, how long is it going to take, and then after that, you may go get a second opinion because you want to know exactly what's expected. You see? That is the kind of things we want to set, the expectation we want to set for those under us. We want them to know not only that, hey, you have a job, but what is expected of you from me. And each supervisor, as you all are in a call center, You all are trying to get the same thing, but some of you may use different means to accomplish that. Some of you may congratulate. Some of you may give a gift card. Some of you may give accolades, an award. These are all different things that you want to think about in doing to help people to meet their goals. And you want to set those concise objectives. Notice what this next point is. You want to observe that team's performance. So sometimes a person may be able to do that by actually writing that out. You may write out what their performance is weekly, monthly, even daily. And that way you have a knowledge of what's being accomplished and they have a knowledge of what's being accomplished. I noticed that on the floor that you work at, I noticed that there wasn't anything written as to how each team is progressing and what they're accomplishing daily. That might be something you can use just to draw your team together. See, if they're a team, they will encourage each other. And then, that snowball effect, you take a snowball and roll it down a hill, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But when no one can see what they're accomplishing or what's going on, they don't have that team feeling, that team spirit, so to speak. And you notice the rah-rah in sports, that builds a team. So maybe you can do that. And just think about areas, something you can put up it could be in the lunch or break room. It could even be on a whiteboard and have someone in charge of making the changes if it's not you. Notice what this third one is. Provide immediate feedback. Immediate feedback is very important because if you don't immediately tell someone that they're doing a good job, then it gets harder to say it later. Each one of you have 50, 60 people under you. How are you going to remember from minute to minute who did a good job? If you let that one person slip through the cracks, that could be your star performer in the next couple weeks or months. And you've just let them slip through the cracks. So you have to have some sort of not only accountability, but you have to be able to provide positive, immediate feedback. And finally, recognize that positive performance. Go ahead and put on the diagram, a whiteboard, or in the lunchroom, something, perhaps even a daily newsletter. You see, that's what your job is. And sometimes as managers, we start to put ourselves into the work that our team is making, but actually our job, that's not our job. Our job is to sit back outside and look at what the team is doing, and then add the feedback, add the positivity, and build the team and keep the momentum going. So how can we be constructive? Well, constructive feedback is different. I've heard people say that they talk about constructive criticism. Now, that's really an oxymoron, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Isn't criticism meant to break someone down? Who likes to be criticized? When you go home, as soon as you walk through the door, you like somebody to say, "Wow, you look like you had a rough day. What happened to your hair? Oh, you look terrible." Can you imagine that? Would you want to go there? No, you wouldn't want to go home. There are plenty of people who don't want to go home and they're sitting in a bar somewhere or out somewhere in a bowling alley or whatever they do because they don't want to go home. Do you want your team not to want to come to work? Imagine them dragging themselves here knowing that you're just going to criticize them as soon as they get here. So there's a process, and then we're going to call it the sandwich process. You may have heard other names for it, but we're going to always give good, constructive things to say first. Then we add the critique, and then we finish with constructive. So it's a sandwich, right? So we'll say something good that the person is doing. That means you have to keep account of what they're doing. Then we tell them where they perhaps need to adjust. And then we finish it up by giving them the commendation again. So you can even say commendation, criticism, commendation. but we want to make sure that it's specific. We want to speak for yourself. So you don't want to say, well, people say this or people say that. Make reference to when you were on the floor. Maybe you were in the call center and you remember that your manager used to say things to you that you didn't appreciate. Now, what does that do? What do you think, in your mind, what does that do for you connecting with your call center people when you make reference to when you were on the floor? What do you think that does?
Connects.
It connects you, exactly. So now, will that person be more apt to listen to you? Well, certainly they will. So now, if you've reached that person, can you motivate them? Yeah, sure. That's right. You've now reached them. Now you can motivate them. If they're motivated and they come to work motivated, will they produce for you? Will your paycheck go up? Yeah, because you make your money based on that. You're a team. If they don't produce, you don't keep your job in this line of business. Also, be sincere. No one hates, no one likes someone who's insincere. They can tell right away. So when you talk to people, tell them exactly what they're doing right. That gives sincerity. And then emphasize how actions affect the team. That way you're not singling out one particular person. When you tear someone down, everybody else notices that. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen it done where, a group of people, someone who's in charge is tearing a specific person down? How does that make you feel? It make you feel good? No. Would you want to work for a person who does that? No. Not at all. But if you're not keeping track of what your people are doing positive, what are you keeping track of? It has to be that you're either keeping track of the positive or the negative. If you're not keeping track of anything, you're hurting your pocket, you're hurting the company, and your value plummets. So all of this helps you to produce and be productive. So keep that in mind, please. Also, you want to use the I technique, and that is speaking from personal experience. We talked about that a little bit. Not what everyone else has done or someone in Timbuktu has done, if there's really a place called Timbuktu, I think. But anyway, whatever they're doing over there doesn't matter. But what you have experienced helps to add to the sincerity. And end on a positive note. You remember what we talked about, the sandwich theory? Commendation, counsel, commendation, criticism. We want to sandwich the meat of what we want to say or the serious thing that we want to get across. Sandwich it in between positive things. All right? And now recognize the improvement. So if I've done a good job, what's the problem with just saying, hey, you did a good job today? Does that hurt? No, it doesn't. It helps. And so now that person wants to come to work the next day. Because remember, even though we're in a business situation, a circumstance here, people are people. So it's time for us to I've noticed that people are on a kind of, management is here, and supervisors, and everyone else is here. So what can we do to change that? We need to even though we're in a supervisory or management position, we want to relate with our workers. Now we have to do that and help them remember that we are their managers and that we are expecting something from them. But by giving commendation, it helps them to appreciate where we're coming from, what we're expecting, what we're expecting of them. Right? So keep that in mind. And we talked about being specific, express your appreciation, encourage more of the same. Right? So notice this in conclusion. Meaningful feedback reinforces outstanding performance and encourages others to improve. Did you notice what the key was? it was meaningful. Meaningful. So we want to have some sort of substance in what we say to our teams. Not just fluff, but we want to have substance. Any questions? Anyone had a thought? Any questions about what we've discussed? Mr. Thorpe?
Well, you talk about most of the positive stuff, but what if you want to talk about what they did wrong to improve?
Yes, good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Remember we talked about the sandwich process, the commendation, and then what they could do to improve, and then commendation. So if, I'll give you an example. If someone comes home, your grandfather or someone comes home, your brother or sister comes home and says, what's the difference between these two? Man, your face could stop a clock. Oh, how would that make you feel? Would it make you feel good? Would you make you feel like you want to see them again? But what if they said, you know what, every time I look at you, time seems to stand still? That makes you feel good, doesn't it? Yeah, you see, but you said the same thing. All right. So right now what we'll do is we go ahead and break into our groups. We'll take other questions that you may have later on, and we're just going to run a few scenarios later on, for the time, about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up our presentation, okay? So we'll ask Mr. Campbell back up.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.